The myth of Daedalus and Icarus starts on the island of Crete, where the Minotaur, a monster with the head of a bull and the body of a man, wreaked havoc. The king of Crete, King Minos, decided to use the Minotaur as a future way to punish enemies, and therefore ordered the architect Daedalus to construct an intricate labyrinth that would be capable of trapping anything and everything, including the Minotaur. However, King Minos would turn on Daedalus, throwing him into the labyrinth alongside his son Icarus. Daedalus, being the architect, knew that the labyrinth was impossible to escape by any human on foot. In order to escape, he would have to transcend humanity and take to the skies. After much time, Daedalus would construct 2 pairs of wings made of pieces of seagull feathers and held together by wax. Daedalus would warn Icarus, telling his son not to fly too high, as the heat from the brilliant sun would melt the wax. Icarus would agree, and they would both then fly out of the labyrinth and away from the island of Crete. Flying was exhilarating to young Icarus. The wind in his hair, the speed, and the weightlessness of his body. The labyrinth that had imprisoned him made him hungry for freedom and for adventure. Faster, higher, Icarus lived blissfully in the moment, until a feather brushed his face, and then another, and then he looked down and saw that his father was but a speck, and he was surrounded by falling feathers. His wings were melting away, and his life with it. He would fall into the sea and drown. The myth of Icarus proposes 3 specific topics that I want to discuss. First is the fallacy behind people's perceptions of life goals and fulfillment. Second is discussing the ideal goal to chase towards in reality. And the third is Icarus's death and its implications for our deaths. Without going further into a tirade about evolution, essentially, humans dominated all other hominids and species, and eventually built grand nations and civilizations. We developed agriculture and shelter against the harshness of nature. We had an excess of time, and we used that to think and build upon our self-awareness, bringing forth art, philosophy, and religion, all to try and justify our lives and seek purpose in what became a relatively boring day-to-day existence. We had comfort and happiness in the sense that we were no longer victims to nature, but we had become victims to our own ego consciousness. Modern society has the common phrase of, just be happy. There's this perception that because of life's finitude, we should try and chase our goals, all the while being as happy as possible. And in the end, hopefully, we will have accumulated enough emotional and sensory experiences so that we feel a baseline level of fulfillment before we die. Most people already generally understand that physical things aren't as important as experiences and memories, which is why so many people choose to travel and spend precious time with family and friends. However, most of these experiences, I would say, are just as superficial as buying a luxury good. Traveling and experiencing this surface level joy from the heat of the sun and the relaxing sounds of the waves lapping on the beach is just as meaningless as any other physical thing. The fallacy arises in that, in the attempt to bring fulfillment to our lives, people lose the key distinction between fulfillment and meaning. This is often when both religious individuals and non-religious individuals bring to surface their defeatist attitude. The religious person will defer the beginning of their truly meaningful life to the afterlife. Eternal paradise awaits, and with it, true meaning. This life is merely the prelude to the real experience. The non-religious person will often have a nihilistic attitude. There is no God and no greater purpose for me, therefore I am free to do as I please. Well, what if I can bring to you purpose? True purpose. I know of no better life purpose than to perish in attempting the great and the impossible. Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher in the 19th century who asserted himself as the destroyer of all values. He realized that in the wake of Christian domination over the European landscape, humanity had looked too far to things outside of this world, looking towards peace, fulfillment in the afterlife, rather than truly living this life we currently have. Do good and do no wrong, then you will be granted eternal happiness. This stifling of ambition and drive, Nietzsche believed, would eventually lead to deep unhappiness. The true goal of life, then, is continual self-overcoming. Over time, this will not only lead to self-betterment, but the entire human race as a whole will evolve both intellectually and culturally to be better than man. In the same way that humans view monkeys today, the Übermensch, as Nietzsche called him, will view humanity a laughingstock or a painful embarrassment. Imagine a society not predicated on superstitions and historical bias, not built on genocide and hatred, not looking toward a future of gluttony and greed. A world where everyone does not wait for another to come and save us from our anxiety and misery. Rather, a world where we each save ourselves and eternally overcome, to chase the unattainable, the great and the impossible. Who am I to tell you what your purpose is, you may ask? The truth is, you have no choice, because man is animal, and you are man. You can choose to become Übermensch-esque and self-overcome intellectually and spiritually, positively impacting the natural selection of human growth. Or you can become what Nietzsche described as the last man, nihilistic, tired of life, and accepting of mediocrity. You will become something that you should overcome. You will serve as an example to those who wish to bring forth the Übermensch. Ultimately, you have no choice, as we are all bound to nature. Nietzsche's Übermensch deserves an entire essay of its own, and will get one inevitably. However, on the topic of Nietzsche, I leave you with the idea of amour fati, love of fate. The meaning and purpose of life is to live it so that you would choose nothing in the universe but to live it again. That level of greatness in life that forces you to desire it again and again is not born from peace and joy. It is born from passion, chaos, and a Dionysian love of life in its entirety. Nobody actually wants to reach any of their goals. Scientifically, this is best exemplified in the brain's tendency to release more dopamine during the active chase towards a goal, rather than the act of getting it. Also, individuals just set more goals after attaining their current ones anyway. The problematic part is age. As we get older, we desire more peace in our lives and become swept away by the tiredness of work and family. We lose track of goals and become okay with what we have already achieved. A common tendency is to believe that it is too late. After all, your body begins falling apart and your mind begins to fog. Deny it. Rage on. Chase past perfection. Chase the sublime and the exalted. Die not with memories, but with unfinished dreams. Contrary to belief, this won't leave you unfulfilled. The true feeling of regret is knowing that you could have done more. You could have pushed further. But you didn't. In the story of Icarus, the end simply says that the wings melted and he would then plummet and drown in the sea. But what if, in that moment when he was free falling down into the water, he closed his eyes and smiled? Of course, he knew he was going to die, and part of him was probably bracing for impact off of pure instinct. But for one moment, just one, he had transcended the impossible and the limits of what was deemed irrational to do. He sought greatness and perished in doing so. Thus is the fate of any legend worth remembering.